Right now, every single time we interact online, our digital lives are just quietly fueling these massive billion-dollar AI models. And for the most part, we get absolutely nothing in return. We're basically operating in a system where our information is just extracted from us to build immense corporate value. But what if it didn't have to be that way? Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to dive into how the fundamental assumptions of the data economy are being totally rewritten by Codatta's infrastructure. We're moving from this era of just unchecked extraction straight into a future where ownership is literally built right into the architecture itself. Let's get into it.
So, to kick things off, I want to start with a really crucial question. It highlights this quiet, kind of invisible assumption we literally all make every time we hit submit on a platform. Once you contribute data, who really controls it? Just think about a specialist for a second. Say a radiologist who spends hours labeling medical images to train a new diagnostic tool, or an indie artist uploading their latest portfolio to a community board. Who actually holds the keys to that incredibly valuable information the exact second it leaves their device and hits the cloud? Well, the harsh reality is, the moment that data uploads, the creator's control just evaporates. Poof, it's gone.
Which brings us to this quote on screen. Once you contribute data, you surrender control over it. It perfectly captures the harsh reality of today's tech ecosystem. Somehow, producing knowledge means you become completely invisible. We've basically been conditioned to accept this deeply unbalanced bargain, right? We provide all the raw material, cross our fingers, hope for the best, while these platforms capture 100% of the commercial value. We're told that for our data to be useful, to build these advanced AI systems, we just have to hand it over, surrender control completely, and just blindly trust that the platform won't misuse it or sell it off to the highest bidder.
Now, this dynamic leads us to a term you hear constantly in AI development: ground truth. If you listen to tech companies, ground truth is pitched as this pristine, magical wellspring of machine intelligence, a perfect foundation of facts. But the reality for the actual humans providing the data? It's way messier and highly extractive. Just look at this definition. Ground truth basically functions as a giant black box. It absorbs real human effort and then completely strips away the visibility, the influence, and the economic participation of the very people who created it in the first place. So let's trace exactly how that happens in this extractive pipeline. Notice how it starts innocently enough at step 1, right? Our radiologist submits their carefully annotated medical scans. But by steps 2 and 3, that contribution is totally swallowed up. It gets absorbed and transforms into proprietary infrastructure for model training. And once that happens, any informal promises or, good faith agreements about how that medical data should be used, they just vanish. It is now the platform's asset to monetize forever, leaving the original creator entirely out of the loop with zero ongoing connection to their own expertise.
Now, the contrast here is absolutely fascinating, because the root of the issue isn't just that companies are bad at following the rules or that we need, longer legal documents. No, it's a structural flaw. Traditional systems treat data governance as just policy, meaning data and policy are two totally separate things, loosely taped together by these fragile terms of service. Those agreements platforms update with an email you probably just send straight to the trash. But look at item 2. Codatta changes this entirely by treating data governance as infrastructure. They actually weld the policy to the data itself, making them absolutely inseparable right at the code level.
So moving into our next section here, policies bound to data, embedding the rules. Let's see how we actually fix this by binding policies directly to the data.
The absolutely crucial point here is understanding how Codatta embeds these contributor control mechanisms right at the protocol level. Think of it like a highly advanced self-destructing digital lockbox. You put your medical scan labels or your digital art in this box, and the key only works if the specific conditions you set are perfectly met. You get to explicitly define who can access the data, exactly how it can be used, the specific context it applies to, and whether it can be reused, combined, or extended. And the coolest part, as that dataset grows and moves around the internet, those lockbox rules stay permanently attached to the code.
Which leads us to this incredibly powerful concept: enforcement without negotiation. Just take a second to think about the millions of dollars and thousands of hours currently wasted on copyright lawsuits, arbitration, all those legal disputes over AI scraping. This bold concept bypasses that entire headache. Rule violations simply never happen in the first place because they are physically impossible to execute. There's no later reinterpretation of terms by some corporate legal team, no silent expansion of how your data is used. It's just enforced, period.
So how does that actually look in practice? Let's walk through this structural boundary. Imagine an unauthorized entity, say a massive, totally unregulated web scraper, trying to pull down your specialized dataset. Well, in step 1, they make the attempt. But in step 2, they hit a foolproof technical vault. The request physically cannot obtain the decryption keys because your embedded policy prevents it. So step 3, access automatically fails at the protocol layer. It doesn't get escalated to a moderation queue, an arbitration panel, or a lawyer's desk. It simply shuts down the action at the base infrastructure level. If you don't meet the criteria, you don't get the keys. End of story.
And that perfectly sets up our next major shift, treating data as a persistent economic asset.
The Codatta contributor model maps out a totally different reality from that dark, extractive pipeline we looked at earlier. Under this model, you retain persistent ownership while safely enabling controlled access for AI developers. It facilitates dataset expansion and collaboration and tracks measurable usage by downstream systems. But the real game changer here is the last point, generating revenue participation through royalties. Imagine our radiologist or our digital artist earning a micro-royalty every single time a downstream AI system references their specific contribution to make a decision or generate an image. It completely transforms the gig economy into true digital equity. You maintain influence and you earn continuously as your datasets actually gain adoption.
And the impact on ecosystem incentives? It is literally night and day. Because this isn't just a win for the people providing the data. Developers are desperate for this too. In the traditional extractive environment on the left, contributors trade ownership for blind trust, which leads to huge hesitation and major legal ambiguity for builders who are terrified of training models on legally toxic, scraped data. But look at the cooperative environment on the right. Enforced ownership changes the math entirely. Contributors gladly share their sensitive, high-quality expertise because they know they're protected and compensated. And builders? They get bulletproof, legally authorized data by design. Trust becomes programmatic, emerging from predictable behavior rather than just relying on corporate branding.
I absolutely love this statement. Ownership that is merely promised rarely reshapes behavior. Ownership that is technically enforced does. It really hits the nail on the head and gets to the heart of this paradigm shift. We've all seen major social networks suddenly decide that user posts are fair game for their new internal AI, despite all their previous privacy promises. I mean, anyone can write "we value your ownership" in a terms of service document. But Codatta removes that gap between intention and execution. They are implementing ownership as a rigid mathematical system property, not just some flimsy platform promise.
Because when we actually enforce ownership structurally, we completely change the definition of ground truth. We can finally move beyond a frozen data set, where data is just this one-off donation extracted and exploited by a single platform. Instead, we're building a continuously evolving knowledge infrastructure. We are looking at the foundation of a real knowledge economy. It's a dynamic system where your human contributions are treated as long-term investments, investments that actually compound in value for everyone involved over time.
Which brings us to a vital question for all of us, navigating this new AI era. Will you continue to surrender your knowledge, or are you ready to participate in a system where your value permanently compounds? Because contributing your hard-earned expertise shouldn't require crossing your fingers and just hoping a tech giant plays fair. It just doesn't have to be an act of blind trust anymore. So I'll leave you with that thought to consider about your own role in the future of the AI data landscape. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.